She, of course, connected with a wider audience than any member of the royal family ever has, making her a cultural icon in life and extending her legacy years after her death. A new book looks at what she continues to mean to the people who knew her and the millions who didn't.
Diana World, An Obsession was written by biographer Edward White. Edward joins us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
I imagine different groups, she appeals to different groups for different reasons, yes?
Well, absolutely. I mean, essentially, Diana World, the book, is an attempt to answer that question of why it is that millions of people from across the world, from all different backgrounds, all kinds of different identities, found a fascination to the point of obsession with Diana. And so that's not just people who adored her. There are also quite a lot of people, and this is something that I think is often forgotten. When she lived, she was the focus of enormous criticism, especially in the UK. She was kind of seen sometimes as the embodiment of all that was worst about modern culture, about the vulgarity of modern culture, about the decay of traditional British institutions, all that kind of thing. And so, yes, in the book, I take in a range of different groups of people. I guide through the readers through Diana World by looking at Diana's relationship with, for instance, African-American people at one point, with her relationship with gay men, her relationship with her fellow aristocrats. And as you say, her meaning to all those people was very different. And the thing is with her that she came into the public eye loaded with so many stories. You know, she's from this 500-year-old aristocratic family, so she had all their baggage when she came into the public eye. She had all the baggage of the royal family when she married into them. She had the mythology of Disney and the Brothers Grimm, you know, the princess mythology. And so she really is this huge storehouse of myth and legend, and identity. And that's the appeal of her, that almost just about everybody can look at her, find something in her that seems to say something essential about themselves and their community.
I think now with, William going to ascend the throne after Prince Charles, and with Harry leaving to go to the United States, do you touch on what people who knew Diana think that she might have thought of how that relationship between her sons is fractured?
Well, the thing is, I find it extremely difficult to engage with that question, partly because, I mean, Diana's been dead for 28 years, but her own ideas about the royal family and being a royal changed so much during the time that she was in that institution. So it's kind of difficult to project forward. The fact that we still are interested in that question really gets to the nub of something important about her, because there are people who say that, well, she would have definitely been on, Team William and Kate, and then other people say she would have been all for Harry and Meghan. And it's because, at least in the public sphere, not their private discussions anyway, that Harry and William are kind of, they represent different sides of Diana.
Yeah.
And so it's a schism. They're tussling over who's defending her true legacy. And the answer to that question is actually very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And Princess Diana she had a different view of royalty compared to her husband's family. What was that distinction, and what were the challenges in trying to mold it her own way?
Well, I think really to understand the Windsor monarchy, it's a really complex institution, but the fundamentals are secrecy and deference. And it's still true today, despite the fact that the royals have changed in various ways. And Diana had a kind of a disdain for both of those things. She was absolutely not somebody who was keen on secrecy. She wore everything, it seemed, on her person. She had similar attitudes to deference, even though she was from a very traditional aristocratic family. And I think those things kind of made her life impossible from the get-go, really. I mean, one of the things I was fascinated about when going back to look at the original newspaper reporting about Diana, even before she was married, whether there were incidents where she cried in public, and there were really, really in-depth newspaper articles over here, at least, about the fact that this young woman, who was going to be our future queen, she's crying in public. And they weren't castigating her for it, but there was definitely a sense of fascination, because that's just not what members of the royal family do.
So you writing, so much has been written about Princess Diana. What did you find out, or what's one story that you found out that would surprise people?
I mean, there are kind of the book, I hope, is like a plum pudding of different strange, surprising stories. One thing that springs to mind, though, is there's a story about a man called General Mustafa Talas, who was a general in the Syrian army in the 1980s. He was the henchman for the Assad dynasty. And he became fixated with Diana, and he told interviewers in the 1980s that he had developed one of the world's biggest library of books about Diana, that he wrote poetry about her. This is what he claimed, at least. And he had a pretty fantastical imagination, so we can take it with a pinch of salt. But I did speak to some British civil servants who said that they received requests from him to send her all manner of different gifts, including a horse. And they found some very diplomatic British way of shoving the request to the side, so they didn't have to deal with a horse turning up at the gates of Kensington Palace. But it reflects the extremities of the obsessions that people form.
Right. Wow. Well, the book is Diana World: An Obsession. Edward White, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.